And we're recording. Hello and welcome to the Coach Support Show where science meets strategy. And this week we are going to dive deep into the finals that were last weekend in Copenhagen with the view of looking at how you take care of yourself as a coach. But speaking of taking care of yourself as a coach, Watson, we have some fantastic news.
Great podcast news, John. Yes. So we have entered into a collaboration with the eHealth Project. And the eHealth Project is an EU-funded project aiming to promote a healthy lifestyle amongst esports players. So e-athletes, esports players, gamers. So we entered into a collaboration with this project, and we just wanted to take a few minutes to introduce the project and its aims and promote some of the work that they're trying to do. So the eHealth Project is a European-wide collaboration crossing 5 different EU countries and involving partners that are universities, esports networks, and one national federation, Belgian Esports Federation. And it's over several years, so I think it's just over a 2-year project. And the goals are to better understand the lay of the land with respect to health, mental health, physical activity within gamers across the globe. So not just within Europe, but also to inform our understanding of the current levels of health and to add to an increasing body of work in that area. And then also to create resources based on that informed understanding that we can put out there and freely promote to the esports community to help support and sustain a healthy lifestyle. So those are sort of the general goals of the project. And within that first step, within that first level of sort of increasing our understanding and getting a good idea of current sort of lay of the land with respect to health in gaming or esports, they're putting out a big survey. So this is an online survey collecting data in different areas of health, and it's anonymous, and it takes maybe around 10 minutes, maybe between 5 and 15 to complete. And this data will be processed, as I said, anonymously, confidentially, and analyzed to produce trends, patterns that can then inform the resources. So that's the eHealth project, and we're collaborating with them to help get the word out.
Okay, so that's the project kind of overall. But what is the goal of the project? What are the outcomes that they're looking for? Like, what's actually going to change for kind of both you and me, but also random people, anyone watching this?
So there will be maybe 3 outcomes, and we're hoping that they'll have direct and indirect impact on everyone that takes part, and even the broader esports community that don't take part. But the benefit is hopefully for everyone. But there is a research component, and if we can use this data to put out something that is rigorous and robust and scientifically worthwhile, that can go on to inform and inspire future research, which might then help tailor even more sophisticated and better sort of health promotion campaigns. That's something that might not immediately benefit in the short term every participant in the project and in the survey. However, that data will inform and guide the creation of these resources. So these resources will probably take the form of some online modules or units that people can work through that contain information, written text, top tips about how to integrate various activities to promote health and physical activity in your daily life. It will hopefully include video resources, so people can just jump onto a website, hit play, and be guided through some sort of exercise to actually do themselves to maybe increase their level of physical activity, let's say, or to help build strategies to integrate certain activities to help with one of those factors. So those are the kind of the resources we're directly hoping will benefit the community very, very concretely, very directly. And then there's another level to it as well, that actually with this information and with enough participation and with some careful thought about what are the key takeaways from this data, and also the usage of the resources we develop, there will be at the final step of the project is to actually create a strategy to help shape policy. So this is maybe at the highest level, the most abstract level to you and I, but trying to actually influence how esports is thought about at the level of governance. So that can be national federations, international federations, actually the sort of governments within countries thinking about how they provide support for people within esports. And that is interesting because actually, I think what we've seen so far in the last 10 years of this rapid rise of esports, what we've seen is a lot of the burden on promoting health and physical activity is on players to go and source that information themselves. It might be on teams to provide the support staff themselves and cover the costs themselves. And I think what we're increasingly seeing is a will to get involved from higher levels, but maybe an uncertainty as to how and where. So with this kind of project, with this data, we can actually help governing bodies make decisions about where to provide the support. And that might not necessarily be like just throw more money at it. It could be just create clearer links for gamers and people involved in esports to go out and find the best resources to help them integrate different habits and healthy strategies into their lives. So that's the kind of thing that I think the three levels at which this project could have valuable impact. The main one being, as I said, those online resources, which will be infographics, videos, maybe even some webinars for live participation down the line, people to really get their hands on knowledge and strategies to help them.
It reminds me actually that first step, that research thing. When we joined the LEC with Excel, we put together a group of performance coaches, and it was called Excel Health or something like that. And as part of that, we worked with a guy called Keith Gladstone, who is an osteopath, and worked with England Rugby, England Cricket, Tottenham Football Club, that kind of thing. And he always said the first thing you do when you come into a new sport as someone like that is you look at the research, you look at what's available there. So I think his example when he first started working with England Rugby was like, okay, rugby players need to withstand the equivalent load of 2 car crashes a week or something like that, which is why it always stuck with me. And so you go from there and then start to tailor it to the actual specifics of the team, the specifics of the people that you're working with. But that first stage, like, we don't have that at all in esports. So when you're watching something online, you're looking at either generalized knowledge or kind of someone's best guess, where really the stage, if we want to move to a more professional environment, is, to find that information out first, right?
Absolutely. It's really important to have this research that's actually very specific to that context you're working in, because of the differences. There are so many distinct, unusual aspects of really participating in esports and trying to make it to a high competitive level. And actually, very interesting you brought it up, because in preparation for sort of this segment of the show, I did some reading into some journals, as you might expect. And there was a really interesting study that I found from a university in South Korea, and they looked at sort of the longevity of player careers based on some open databases. And they looked at date of birth of players. They looked at sort of time of entry into their first major competition, and they looked at the last records of when they played their last major competition and earnings and all things like that. And actually, they reported that increasingly the players are their player careers, as evidenced by their first major tournament and their last, is getting increasingly short, to the point that most players will exit within their first 2 years of starting their career. And at the same time, players are fairly young in comparison to sport. So the entry might be anything between 16 and 18, and their careers might sort of stretch into the 20s. And whilst we are seeing increasingly older players staying in the system and still competing, for the majority of players, I think at the moment, they're still going to be exiting fairly young. And why is that is really important for this project is because actually it's in those late teenage years where, if we can develop habits to be physically active and to look after our health and well-being, they're likely to stretch into later adulthood. However, if we completely ignore them and we don't encourage physical activity and other health habits in that younger age bracket, we're likely setting people up to struggle with adopting those habits later on in adulthood. So it's actually a really important time to help people, if they're not already very highly physically active, and they're not holistically, across the board of sleep, nutrition, etc., not doing so well, it's harder to change those behaviors later on. So it's a really, really important time to get involved and to provide these resources to a young demographic.
Yeah, I think as well, one of the things that's worth mentioning here is that again, obviously, I'm coming at this from an esports rather than just a gamer point of view. So maybe it is a bit specific, it is a bit narrow. But with the ecosystem, especially in a game like League of Legends, the way it is at the moment, with people struggling to be able to provide, sufficient support and all those kind of things, especially across like the ERL system we have, it's very difficult for organizations to even survive just with normal coaches and a team. So this is always the first thing that goes, unfortunately. Completely reasonable, but this kind of support, this kind of aspect of high performance is the first thing that an organization cuts if they have to cut back on money. If you've got someone there to support your players' physical health or even support your players' mental health, unfortunately, it's just longer term. It's longer before you see the return on it. And therefore, it kind of realistically has to be the first thing that's cut. So that's why I think a project like this can be so powerful, because like you said, if it's like governments getting involved and it's universities and it's research bodies where they are able to think in the longer term, they don't have to turn something around in a year. They don't have to quickly perform by the end of summer before we replace all our players again and start again. So it is a better angle for this kind of thing to be much more sustainable.
Absolutely agree. And it's a key part of the project as well, the eHealth project and the funding from the European Union. They're very concerned with the longevity. So will the resources created be useful beyond the lifespan of the project? That's a really sort of key part. So the resources that are created online will be able to stand the test of time to some degree. And of course, more research will come in years to come, but maybe that adds to what's available through the project. But yeah, that's really important. And we're not saying, I wouldn't like to think that by involving those sort of structures that aren't so influenced by the competitive wins, shall we say, we're undermining the responsibility they have to provide those support staff. But it could be for maybe people that are on their way to entry into teams that can provide that support. They have these resources, and obviously it will be accessible, it will be low cost, it will be free resources online. So hopefully we're just equipping people with skills at an earlier stage, and then they'll enter into teams that will have their own systems and their own staff, hopefully at some stage. What's another interesting point about what level of player will benefit from this? There's been some work on mental health in esports, and they looked at sort of different aspects of mental illness and mental health at different competitive levels. And there seems to be, among that grassroots amateur group, quite reasonable levels, and people are probably enjoying the experience of starting out and connecting with friends and playing a game for fun. And at the highest level, there seems to be a reasonable amount of support there. But there is this step before people make it into the big leagues, where you could imagine they are really motivated to get there. They spent a lot of time trying to get there, and maybe they're starting to feel the pressure to make that time pay off. There is a subset there where there is maybe some more concern about the level of mental health, and perhaps physical activity might feed into that. So if we can provide support that is independent of being in the lucrative leagues and tournaments, that is available to everyone and anyone, perhaps we can see a real uptick in health and well-being, and maybe the level of performance. So
yeah, and I think as well, obviously we would love it to be a situation where all the top teams are really focused on this stuff already, but actually, even if new players coming in are really interested in this stuff, it forces organizations to take it seriously and do their own kind of research into this. And this actually has been a big thing over the last few years, that players who were in the LEC when it started are less focused on this kind of thing. And sometimes ERL players coming in have had stories of, I have to get them outside, get them, get my teammates outside, get my teammates running, get my teammates to the gym, all that kind of thing. Even though these are people that they've maybe looked up to for most of their playing career, suddenly they're saying, look, guys, we can't do this. We have to take this more seriously, and we have to be more professional around it. So it does also feed into the top teams, although like we say, you would hope that they have their own resources, their own way to do this. And I think this eHealth thing is a bit more targeted at the grassroots and also the lower levels of competitive play.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully building habits that will last a lifetime and will benefit everyone. So that's really important. And it's interesting you brought up, just we are still at fairly early stage in the sort of life of esports, really. And there are a lot of unanswered questions. For example, how do we train best to be high performing in a specific game? What does that look like? It probably involves quite a lot of time at a computer and engaged in the game itself. And we need to be quite creative about how we lead healthy lives around that. And I've spoken to various practitioners at quite high levels of play, and they recognize that maybe in the heat of a split, we're going to have to allow for a lot of time engaged in sedentary behavior and screen time as we're trying to improve at that game. That is the goal, that, our immediate goal in that moment. However, maybe we need to think in a more sophisticated way about how we use off seasons and how we promote a healthy lifestyle as a strong base from which to develop the in-game skill. And I've had first-hand experience, some quite touching stories of players who felt like actually there is no off season for them in a given year, because maybe they're at that ERL level trying to make the jump to the top, and they feel like actually the off season is when they need to prove themselves even more, because that's when they might be landing their next big contract and they need that high game rank. So we need a creative solution, and we need some robust evidence-based resources to promote these health strategies in the context of esports. So yeah, that's the spiel. That's me getting off my soapbox a little bit, but I think it's really important, and I'm really happy that we get to promote that on the show.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what we want to be talking about on this kind of show. So actually that leads me into what we're going to do first, with this, because I think this is a great format for the stuff that we already wanted to talk about, the stuff that we didn't talk about last week because we ran on talking about other stuff, which is how to take care of yourself as a coach. So of course we'll go into details and all that kind of thing. But I thought actually it'd be a great thing to do would be to go through this survey and actually answer it for myself in Lyon. I was very tempted, but I haven't looked at it in advance. So we're going to answer it how it was in Lyon normally, what I normally do, all the little tricks and habits and things that I do to, I was going to say make it through the day. That sounds horrible. to try and maximize my own performance is a better way of saying it. And then we'll do the same thing for Copenhagen as well when we're traveling around. So let's just start with the survey now. So if you can just read me off some questions from the beginning, and we'll use that to hopefully explain like why I do the things I do, as well as the fact that I do them.
Sure. Okay. So one question here. It's quite interesting that you mentioned the comparing the different phases of your competitive calendar, because that's one of the key parts of the survey, is actually trying to get a sense for how certain health behaviors over the last week or more. So one of the questions here is, how much energy or vitality did you have during the past week? Would you say very low, moderate, high, very high?
So what we'll do is for now I'll answer it when I'm based in Lyon. Like I'll answer like my general week, because last week was the week where I was in Copenhagen. It was also the week that I was unbelievably ill, which is obviously going to mess both of these things up. So this now is the Lyon version of me. I think in general, what was the ways to answer it?
So you've got 5 points, 5-point scale: very low, low, moderate, high, or very high. So the question: how much energy or vitality did you have during the past week?
I would have probably high in general, or maybe moderate/high.
Brilliant. Did you feel worn out during the past week?
Yes.
Never?
In most weeks. Sorry, what was that? Never?
Never, rarely, sometimes, often, always.
Sometimes, I think, is my normal answer. I do find myself actually, I do all these, I go to the gym a lot, I get a lot of physical exercise, all those kind of things, and that does help. And I take a lot of supplements and things like that I need. But I do still find myself kind of tired most of the time. I think that's a lot of not only esports life, but just modern life, I do think. So it's interesting.
Okay.
We'll see if we'll get into it.
Yeah, well, the next question is actually, how much did physical health or emotional problems interfere with your social activities over the last week? And again, 5-point scale. Not at all, a little bit, somewhat, quite a bit, very much.
So a normal week would be not at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, not that during a split I have a huge amount of social
No, right.
time, but it wasn't impinged by physical or mental health stuff at all in general.
Great to hear. How much of the time during the past week have you felt calm and peaceful? None of the time, a little of the time, some of the time, most of the time, all of the time.
I would say most of the time.
Great.
In a general week, I'm fairly calm as a person. I'm fairly used to competition and able to keep kind of calm about it. I remember at one point, it was on Solari actually, we did some work with a nutritionist, and one of the things he did was like heart rate monitor and sort of mental exercises and visualization and imagining your team is in a very tough situation and all those kind of things. And then afterwards, it was it's like breathing exercise or something like that. And I remember even though my heart rate did go up a lot in the visualization, it drops off really, really quickly, and I'm back down to a kind of baseline very quick. So I would say, yeah, calm most of the time. I would say all, but I have to say, I never really answer stuff like all on a survey like this, because there must
No,
be times in a week where like I'm not. So
you often see that sort of floor and ceiling effects
yeah,
in surveys like that. Like people feel like, surely I can't put all the time. Like who does that? And that's one of the limitations of using questionnaires in this way, that people can't elaborate too much on it. But in the next step of the survey, actually, there will be some interviews. So participants will be asked if they'd like to take part in an interview to sort of articulate in more detail some of their responses. But so far sounds reasonably good for a coach in the middle of the split. We'll do just a couple more. So the question actually is during the past month here, but you feel free to answer it for a week because we're doing this comparison of the weeks. During the past month, how would you rate your sleep quality overall? And this is just four points on the scale. Very bad, fairly bad, fairly good, very good.
I would say general is fairly good. I have really struggled with sleep my whole life. It was actually the thing that got me into all the performance side of coaching, is that I started reading books about sleep and therefore started to read books about health and started to read and look at people around those kind of things. So I remember when I was younger finding out that people didn't lie in bed for a couple of hours before falling asleep. I thought that was just like a thing that people did, but I actually do remember that moment. So I do a lot of things around sleep that do help a lot, and I've got a system that works well, including, I think for me, magnesium was an absolutely massive one. I don't know if there's such a thing as magnesium deficiency, but I don't know if maybe that was part of the problem. That's been a massive help. And then I do stuff like I keep the light very low after a certain time. That's really, really useful. So brushing your teeth in the dark rather than brushing your teeth with a big light on. And I avoid screens wherever I can. So the ideal would be after 9, no screens at all, and then go to bed a couple of hours after that. So trying to find that time to like wind down, do some maybe stretching, maybe read a book, all those kind of things, and just relax a bit. So that's a big one. One thing that I do struggle with is also like night sweats. So that can sometimes have a big impact on the quality of my sleep. So it does depend on what week we're talking about or what month we're talking about. But I would say if I'm talking about my life in general, it's been kind of better than it has been in my entire life now, my sleep. And I would say it's fairly good. Still, I'm not a good sleeper. My wife is a very good sleeper. She can sleep a lot. But me, I normally wake up early in the morning and that kind of thing, no matter how tired I am. But other than that, it's been fairly good, is what I'd say. That's a very long-winded answer, but fairly good.
No, I mean, thank you for the detail. That's really good to hear that you've found some things that work for you. And I mentioned this recent mental health survey. There was a recent mental health survey of over 1,000 players, and there were quite an alarming rate of moderate to severe depressive symptoms amongst this sample. And through quite a sophisticated analysis, it seemed that sleep disturbance was one of the big factors that was influencing that. And I think sleep onset latency is you mentioned that, lying awake for hours before getting to sleep, that's quite, it seems to be quite an issue in esports and gaming. So something that maybe
a lot of people finish that last solo queue game and may be very frustrated about it, or at least thinking about it a lot, and go straight to bed in the same room as they're playing their game. So we're not giving ourselves the best shot at it, but it is, I think it's a big problem. And I love the Matthew Walker thing of, we think of sleep as another one of the healthy pillars, but really it's the foundation on which everything else is built. So for me, literally the first presentation or talk that I ever gave as a kind of purely performance coach point of view, like not talking about the game, was about sleep. And that's the one I've given the most to people, about how much they should sleep and ways to help and all that kind of stuff. So that for me is a huge one.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, John. So we're still in Leon here, and we'll skip forward a little bit. There are some more questions about how many hours you might get on average, things like that. So touching on sleep quality and sleep quantity. Then there are some interesting ones that are more social factors. And I think I'm particularly interested in this myself, because I feel like a lot of our well-being is nestled in those relationships we have with other people. So I'll just pull out maybe one item from this. So how about, I can talk about my problems with my friends. And this is, maybe just articulate it how you will, because there's quite a lot of points that you could answer on this one.
Yeah. This is a difficult one for me, actually, because I've obviously now living in France, so it's quite different. It's not all the friends that I've known for a long time and stuff like that. My problem at the moment is here I don't have like real friends yet, I guess would be the slightly depressing way of saying it. I don't speak French well enough to have a friendship purely in French, I think, probably. But also it's just, actually, when you move to a new city as an adult, it's hard to meet friends, So there's a few people that we're starting to get to know better and better, and that's fantastic. And doing things with them on like a even weekly basis, again, is fantastic. But with how busy you get doing esports, and the fact that I also might move again to do a team and then come back, and all that kind of thing. And up until this year, like, this is the first time really that we've even just sort of decided to have a base somewhere and just say, right, okay, we're going to treat Lyon like the place that we're going to live forever. So all of those things make it very, very difficult to kind of talk about problems with friends, because I would say I don't really have as many friends as I would want, even in person. Then, of course, you have the online thing, where there are people that I see and get along with really, really well, that I can see while like playing games. And I think one of the things that we have, especially as men, as a problem, I think it is bigger for men, but it obviously can be either way, is that you meet up, you do something together, and you talk all the time, and then you get afterwards, and like Inna will ask, like, oh, and how are they doing? And I'm like, I don't know. In that game, they were doing quite well, but I do have to make like a specific effort for that. So I do have friends that I can talk to about stuff, and I do have friends that I can call if I'm really struggling with something, which is great. And when people come to Lyon or whatever, then there are friends that I have that I think are very important, and I'm able to talk about a lot of stuff with. But on a kind of daily or weekly basis, there isn't there isn't any. So I guess it's kind of both, depending on what actually the specific answers of that scale would be.
Yeah. Well, again, powerful stuff, John. Thanks for sharing that. And it does make me think that you and me, this might as well be we could do a podcast for expats, honestly, like you and me. Like, because I resonate with everything you're saying there, having jumped around a few different countries, and every time you settle in a country where, especially for us, maybe English isn't the language of the region, and yeah, you're maybe behind with picking it up a little bit, and then trying to find people that have just fun, spontaneous meetups with it can be tough. Yeah, the anecdote for me is actually when I've moved to a new country, I tend to join a sports team of some kind, and I spend the first 6 months not having a clue what's going on, and I just gravitate around the word ball, and then my language skills develop from there. And actually, as my language skills develop, my social relationships in that setting drastically improve. So yeah, I sympathise with that, and yeah, thanks for sharing it.
Sports teams are a great one, or even just like Facebook groups or whatever. There'll always be an expats of whatever city you're in group.
Yeah.
Where you can try things. We're doing at the moment. There's only actually one other person who comes consistently, but there's a pub quiz every week that we try and go to,
yes.
which I think is just a great excuse to come together and chat a bit.
Absolutely, yeah, fully endorse the trivia nights, quiz nights. Great. Okay, so I think I would say looks like we've got a reasonable amount of sort of vitality, energy, generally feeling quite calm and well, not having anything that really necessarily impedes your ability to see others or do important tasks for you, and then sleeping pretty well. So that's John, the coach in Lyon, in your home base.
Yeah.
Maybe one just important one for the audience, perhaps during the last week of John in Lyon, could you speak to how many minutes on average you do exercise and physical activity, and you can lump it all together, sort of long walks, because you do a lot. I think
I do a lot. Yeah. Well, during a typical week, I'm still getting back into it, but during a typical week, I maybe go to the gym 3 or 4 times. I tend to spend a decent amount of time in the gym if I can, but I'm not someone who thinks that you need to spend a lot of time in the gym working out. So I would say I only spend let's say half an hour of that actually doing like a sort of intense workout. I love the sauna, so whenever I can, I do 20 minutes in the sauna as well, which makes the whole thing feel like a long time. But it's great about talking about both physical and mental health. That's great for me. I used to do draft prep in the sauna as well when I was at Solari, which I think is a great thing to do. Or
awesome.
Even before at Excel, we had meetings in the sauna. Me and a friend. Whenever it was if it's just the two of us in a meeting, it's well, should we do it in the office, or do you want to just go to the gym and have the meeting in the sauna? That's fine. I also think, by the way, that is a really good. It's funny, but it also, that kind of thing is also genuinely a really good tactic. Let's say you're in person and you and a strategic coach. I was thinking about this. So at the moment we're in EMEA Masters. Me and Joko, who's our new strategic coach for the tournament, are having a lot of meetings about draft and about what we want to do and all that kind of thing. I was just thinking, if we're in person, let's just go to the gym together and talk as we're doing stuff, because any kind of moving around, there's the Nietzsche quote, something like I can't remember. I'm already completely butchered this, so I'm sorry, but it's something like there's never been a truly great idea that hasn't been had while walking. He was a massive proponent of just walking around and getting physical movement, and that was where you had all your best ideas. And I would have tested that myself as well, all my best ideas around anything that might be actually different, or anything that might be actually new or creative, not just in esports but in films and stuff like that, it would be while I'm walking around, while I'm doing something, while I'm engaging my body as well. So yeah, finding ways to combine those two I think is really good. And then I like to do 1 or 2 at least cycles a week, which are maybe hour and a half or 2 hours. So I don't know what it kind of adds up to. It's something that I've just kind of ramped up and done more and more because I love it. and I love the way it makes me feel. So yeah.
Did you say 2 rides of about 4 hours? Did you say?
No, about 2 hours, hour and a
Okay,
half to 2 hours. Depends on the route that I go. The two routes that I do the most, one is about an hour and a half, and one is about 2 hours.
fantastic.
Yeah, so let's say 3 or 4 times in the gym and 2 cycles. But then, I mean, one of the things that I think is really important has been important for me, I don't know if it comes into this survey, is like the tiny little habits. At one point, I'm going to do probably a short video of like, these are the little things I do to survive a day of scrims. But they've been really, really useful. So I'll just list them off now, unless there is a section of the survey that's more specifically about this, or should I just list them?
No, but it could be something we touch on in a follow-up interview, for example, if you wanted to talk. Yeah.
So one thing that I would highly recommend, which I do this thing where, you know, you can return anything to Amazon. I'm very interested in all these little health products, so I like try them and then I return them. And there's a lot of things that I buy and return. There's a few things that I bought thinking I would return it, and I haven't. So the first one would be a light bar, which is a thing that goes above your monitor. I can turn it on. I mean, you guys can tell a little bit of difference, but not much. You turn it on, it's above your monitor and it shines down onto the monitor, and it just softens your like eye strain and stuff like that. And I have to say, I did buy it thinking like, this is probably going back, but it'll be an interesting thing to try. And now I literally, I mean, one time I tried to get my wife to get one, and I lent it to her for a day, and then I was like, no, I need it back. So that I think is absolutely fantastic. I love the standing desk. So I do that for at least 1 or 2 of the VOD reviews of scrims, but I'd like to do it for all of them. So for doing the VOD review, I stand up. Based on what we were talking about last week as well, also useful for how I'm talking and how dynamic I'm being with my words, because I'm standing up and I can move about and I have a bit more energy because of that. Then my personal thing as well is to do a little bit of exercise after each scrim or between each scrim game. So I have a little counter on my stream of like chin-ups and press-ups. It's chin-ups at the moment because in my entire life I've never been able to do chin-ups until recently, so I'm just loving it, doing loads of them. So yeah, doing just like a little bit of something. But even, I mean, No Way, our mid laner, he does a little walk around his room. Even something like that, I think, is absolutely fantastic. I think if you can, you know, speaking of resources, actually, we created some resources when I was at Excel that I still, maybe I shouldn't admit this, I still use. Technically, they're an unlisted playlist that I sent to myself so that I could use it. But it's just like a really small, like 2-minute mobility routine that, again, you can use after each game. Just a little bit of like stretching, a little bit of moving around, those kind of things. And then the last tool, which I use to survive a day of scrims, is I actually have an under-desk elliptical machine. So you do like a little sort of cycling on it as you go. It's just entirely lower body, which I actually like, because the problem, I was looking at getting either a thing so I can be walking or this. The problem I have with walking is that it's quite all consuming, you know, like you can't walk and talk and not sound like you're walking. You know, you run out of breath and all those kind of things. Whereas this, I can actually do, I mean, when I play games, sometimes I'm doing it while I'm playing the game as well. This I can actually do to just get some movement, but it's entirely lower body. So my upper body is like just fine. So while I'm watching some scrims, I'll just do that as well.
Amazing.
So I think those are all my little tactics. I mean, I have like a power ball on my desk and stuff like that just to fiddle with and use occasionally for like some forearm things.
What?
But yeah.
Fidgeting is known to contribute to energy expenditure across a week or a long
time.
Yeah. I mean, just a quick note there. It looks like so the recommended guideline per week for a long time has been 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per week. 150 minutes. By my calculations, you probably engage in over 10 hours of moderate to vigorous physical activity per week. So in terms of engaging in physical activity, you would seem to be doing very well on that. So, and plus, that's a lot of those things you've mentioned are sort of lower level intensity physical activity, but they're the kind of things that will add up over the course of a week to probably result in an enormous amount of health benefit. So, I mean, it sounds like you're doing very well on that front. In a typical Leon week.
Yeah, typically, yeah, exactly. This is the slight problem in a weird way of all this kind of stuff, is that when you don't have all these things, it can. I don't know if it actually is worse. I always try and think about this because I had the same thing the last boot camp we went to, where it all just kind of deteriorated. And by the end of the week, I was like, oh my God, I need to get need to get back home. And I don't know if it's because I do all these things and so without them, I feel worse, or it's like I do all these things and I didn't realize how good I could feel. And so I go back to how I used to feel normally. And I think, oh my goodness, I have no energy. I have way worse mood and all that kind of thing. And I think it's probably a bit of both. I do think you, it would be my guess at least, that you do go back a little bit lower than you would have been if you'd have never done any of the important physical things or even mental things. But also it's just realizing how much energy I could be having that I didn't have for all the earlier parts of my career when I didn't do any of this stuff and didn't take care of myself properly at all.
Yeah. Powerful stuff there. Shall we compare then? Shall we go through?
Yes, let's talk about finals. I mean, we can use this to also talk about finals in general, like how I thought about them, because we of course did that a bit. We did that a bit last finals too. But should we start? Let's start with the survey for finals, and then move on to just general stuff.
Could you just explain to the audience what we're talking about when we're saying finals?
Yeah. So last week, going into last weekend, we played the NLC Finals in Copenhagen. So event was called League Disrupt. It was a fantastic event, really, really cool. I think 3,000 people or so, and especially on the finals day, a packed venue, which was really nice. And it was us against Los Ratones in the grand final. We didn't play on Saturday, we did play on Sunday. So the plan initially was to go to Copenhagen on Tuesday and to do a boot camp so that we're there a little bit in advance to cover some of the stuff that we talked about before, to make sure that we actually had a specific routine, to make sure that we kind of settled in before just arriving super late and then instantly going to play. So it was the finals weekend. The final, unfortunately, went very badly. It went the same as it did last time. So we went 0-3, although it was much more competitive even than last time, and we really should have won probably 2 of those 3 games. But still, the result, I mean, they were very good on the day, and we weren't good enough. But still, that's the finals of NLC.
Great. So let's take maybe, including that day, working backwards over that last week. How much energy or vitality did you have during that week?
Whatever the lowest one is, probably. Now, again, this is a bit unfair because I was really, really ill on Sunday. So 7 days before the final, out of nowhere, I woke up unbelievably ill, the illest I've ever been as an adult. And so I missed my flight on Tuesday. I wasn't well enough to fly on Wednesday or Thursday and ended up flying out on Friday. So everyone else went out on the Tuesday, and I joined them on Friday. So, of course, most of this is not actually the fault of traveling and being in Copenhagen or anything like that, but nonetheless, whatever the lowest energy score was, that's what I was at.
So very low. And then the next question was, did you feel worn out during the past week? I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Always.
But I would say, okay, so like I was very, very ill. And of course, I think a really big thing is that over that time, I didn't really sleep, or I was kind of always sleeping, like always sleeping / didn't sleep, like one of those kind of illnesses. And when I went by the time I went to Copenhagen, it was kind of, I was fully better. So I'm not just saying that it was very low because of that. Obviously, that did interrupt a lot of things, interrupted a lot of our prep as well, which was a shame because I went into the finals feeling very underprepared. But even just, the travel to a new country, the not having all the things that you might want, the sleeping in a hotel room where, for example, some of the players had real problems with their hotel rooms, the doors like massively shaking every time someone went past, to the point that it felt like someone's like trying to break in, kind of thing. Like, it's really, really loud and disrupting your sleep and all that kind of thing. So it is both. Like, I don't want to say that all of these answers are because I was ill or anything like that, because that seems a bit silly, to just say like, well, ask me the day after I was ill and I'll do this survey and you'll think esports players are super unhealthy. But yeah, I think it was still pretty low energy, even considering all of that stuff, because it always is going to be. And you have a huge amount of adrenaline, of course, to kind of get you through it.
Yeah, actually, that adrenaline, we should talk about that later, because there is that sort of heat at the moment drive that pushes you past maybe aspects that might be, not optimal beyond that. But so how much did your physical health or emotional state interfere with social activities, for example?
Um,
Social activity here, we could also just talk about relationships with people outside of
yeah,
esports.
yeah. I mean, with people outside of esports, it just kind of went on pause
Right.
for the week, which it kind of always was going to, just because of the like intensity of it. And relationships with the team and stuff while I was there were actually very good. It's great to see everyone in person, and that kind of thing. So yes, if you're talking about genuine like social aspects, it was just a zero. But that was, yeah, kind of.
I think that's the interesting sort of caveat here for the coach, also for players, is that it's you might not, the word interfere might sound a bit negative and strong, but actually the way you put it, like, it just kind of pauses it for a bit, which might be okay if it's anticipated and it's in the short term. But if this was constant and traveling every week, for example, like, how much could that interfere with your relationship quality and social life over time? That could be, detrimental to health, if not, managed and with the appropriate strategies in place. How much of the time, this might be the interesting one here, how much of the time during the past week have you felt calm and peaceful?
Again, that wasn't actually too bad, I would say. Not a huge amount of the time, obviously, because of being at the event, because of being very excited to play on the stage and being in the finals and wanting to win.
Your previous answer was most of the time.
Yeah, I would go one down from that.
Okay,
My previous answer was most of the time / all of the time, but I don't really want to say all of the time.
Right.
Now my answer would be the middle one.
Some of the time.
Some of the time, yeah.
And when you weren't calm and peaceful, were you anxious? Were you stressed? Were you more positive?
I think excited is the best.
Excited.
Yeah, the best way to think about it. I mean, I guess from the inside, the difference between nervous and excited is a bit more just a matter of perspective, at least according to me. So I think I was excited, and I was excited. It was a really fun event to be a part of, and fantastic to be on a massive stage in the NLC, which I never thought would be possible. And it wouldn't have been a year ago. Considering to sell out a stadium with way more people than normally watched the stream would be quite something. So yeah, it was just, I think, excited.
Amazing. That's great. And so then the sleep question, over that period of time, how would you rate your sleep quality?
Yeah, so as soon as obviously during the illness, it was whatever zero is. But from afterwards, it was still like fairly low. It was okay. One of the things that happens in events like this is that you're so dictated by the schedule of what's going on around you and all the things you have to do. We have to do like tech checks and this thing and then that thing. And then we have the added complication of course, we have like streamer obligations. So Yankos has got to stream the LEC, which means we can't do our meeting about draft or our team dinner until after that. So suddenly you're doing a team dinner at 9 o'clock or starting at 9 when you're waking up at 8 the next day to go to the finals, and none of that's what I would want to do. I'd want to eat much earlier and all that kind of thing. So I think if it's a scale of 5 again, I would say like 2 probably. afterwards, after the illness. I think it wasn't particularly good, but it wasn't the worst. Again, it wasn't. If I had forgot to bring my magnesium, it would have been much worse, kind of thing. So I have the ability. I have the ability to sleep worse than that. I know, but it wasn't great.
That's a positive spin on it. So before it was sort of you answered fairly good, so now it's fairly bad. But you managed to bring some of those strategies, let's say strategies, with you. So although you're on the road, some things were as they were at home, other things weren't.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and I always bring like really good earplugs and mask and stuff like that, just in case I need it. Definitely needed the earplugs because the room needed to have the window open. But yeah, I think it was
cool.
Not great, but okay.
Okay. And then, so final question then was not final question on the survey. There are a few more on the survey. The last two for us. One would be, you can talk about your problems with your friends. Maybe this is interesting to think about. It's kind of obvious that it's going to be very similar to how you described in Leon, but also it's sort of, maybe it's indicative of the bubble you're in when you're at these events, that the things you're dealing with that are right in front of you aren't, I could imagine, they're not really things that you would text a non-esports connection about and say, cool, we were late on stage, the referee was interrupting me during draft. Like, that's maybe not the kind of thing that is something you really share with people outside of that bubble. I don't know if that's any truth in that.
No, I think not. I think it's, you can of course have the benefit of being able to talk to the people around you when you couldn't when you're all online. But yeah, I don't think there's any kind of talking about those things. What I would have loved to do is to work with a coach for myself, in which case I would have been able to do that in like reflections and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which definitely is something that I want to do going forward if I have the budget for it. When I'm paid to coach again, I will get a coach to coach me. That's what I'm definitely going to do. Because having someone in your corner that you can talk to about all this stuff, I think is really, really important, and just making sure you just keep up that routine and just get that kind of out of your head. So it wouldn't be a friend. Again, it would be someone in a professional context, but still it would be a way to have that conversation, because the details of all this stuff, I think, not something that we'd share with just random people outside of esports. I mean,
for sure. Could that be one of your staff, like an assistant coach, or would you go for a professional mentor?
I would go for someone outside of the team. It doesn't have to be someone who's like a professional mentor. One person that I wanted to do it with for a lot of this split, but who's been a bit busy, unfortunately, is a friend of mine called Jamal, who is a professional rugby player. So just someone who's very interested in high performance, has been in the Premiership for a long time now. And so is very familiar with high performance. And that would have been great for me. So bit of a shame that we couldn't make that work the whole time, but still was very useful while we did it. So something like that, or someone like yourself as well. When there's I think I think this is literally one of the most important things you can do as a coach, is to have someone who's in your corner and helping you, and you can talk to, and you can rant to, and you can share what's going on, even if they are just there to listen, and then you end up solving it yourself or something, but you're just getting it out of your head. And for me, I think it has to be, obviously you will talk about this stuff with an assistant coach or anything like that, but it has to be someone outside of the normal, doesn't have to be outside of the organization, but outside of the structure,
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. And then final question, then, over that weekend, how was your level of physical activity in comparison?
Basically zero. I was so excited by the fact that there was a gym at the hotel. But I think because I wasn't there from Tuesday and just doing things and getting into the right routine, I didn't ever have time to do any physical activity, really. I mean, we walked around a lot to the event and to venues and stuff like that, but zero physical activity over the time.
Okay, so what got involved? What got in the way there? Was it the obligations of the competition, or was it the prep? was it?
Just schedule. Yeah,
Right.
so I was hoping to have time, like, okay, on days where we're boot camp days, I would have plenty of time in the morning because I get up a lot earlier than, especially no way. So we don't start scrims until afternoon, and I would be able to have the morning to do stuff. But then literally I arrived on Friday. So on Friday, I didn't have time because I went straight to the boot camp place and then stayed there until late. And by the time I got back to the hotel, I was needing sleep. And then on Saturday, we went to the venue to watch the games. But then after that, we had to stay around to do tech checks. And then we had to go to our room. And then we went to then we went to have dinner. Then by that point, it's 10 o'clock and then, or 11 o'clock, unfortunately. And then, so it's just the schedule of things. And our games, because they had to be done before the LEC, started really early. So if the broadcast starts at 10, teams have to be there at like 9:30 or 8 or something. So getting up before that to do the gym was not a good, sensible idea, I think.
Yeah, you can see the challenges in that. So, I mean, illness to the side, illness aside, generally speaking, that weekend on these metrics would be, it put a slight dampener on those health behaviours. But you managed to get things in. Some things weren't drastically affected, but just maybe slight pressures on your time and your level of comfort in those areas, and it was obviously restrictive in terms of your time and things like that. So a slight clash. I could have imagined it was going to be far more significant, the difference.
I think from, if I'd have been there from Tuesday, I would have really need to make a serious effort to make sure that it wasn't.
Right.
Because I'm just there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There's loads of adrenaline going around to get me through the weekend. And so, my Monday wasn't, I was very, 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 very tired. And it took until sort of, Tuesday, Wednesday or to feel better about things and feel kind of back to normal. But if it was a longer thing, it would have started to add up. So the week we did in Munich, for example, by the end of that, I was like, I can't just keep doing this. Like maybe I could have when I was 20, but I can't anymore. It would have added up. And I think it's the fact that it was so short, which is why they end up being kind of similar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fascinating. And we spoke about this as well in I believe it was our 4th episode. We did a reflection exercise and then we spoke a little bit about coach well-being. And one of the areas that was really interesting to me is just this idea that actually just throwing around the term work-life balance isn't going to be the fix for a lot of coaches, because they can sometimes engage in those 18-hour days fueled by adrenaline, and it feels completely aligned with how they see themselves as a coach and what they want to be doing. But it's just ensuring that when those days aren't there are the other side of the coin are the rest and recovery and other things that can be done to sort of refill the tank a little bit. So it's almost like taking a strictly maybe human resources approach, where it's like, check in at 9, get out at 5, do all those health activities. Like, that's just not realistic for a lot of coaches, and especially in your finals experience.
Yeah. And I think as well, it really resonated with what you were saying before about players feeling like they don't have an off season. I think the same thing applies to coaches. So I'm currently either in the process of talking to some organizations or trying to be in the process of talking to organizations, and my split hasn't even finished. And if I was to talk to them, then firstly, I've got to be available to talk and available to put some time in to prepare presentations, to prepare talks, to prepare plans, all that kind of thing. But then also if I do work somewhere else or I work with Nord again, like I need to start planning for summer very, very quickly. And so finding a time to just really genuinely fully switch off is very difficult because, it annoys my wife no end that on the weekends or something, sometimes I have to just go and reply to some messages because something's happened. And I would really like to not be in that situation, but we're currently in the most important tournament that we're going to be in. So I can't just ignore stuff. But the problem is that because it's this one actually is the most important tournament that we could be in, right? Because after this, everyone's done. But it's like, right, that finals weekend was like the most important tournament, and then like the game before that was like the most important game,
Yeah,
and then the game, like it's always going to be that way. So you go
yeah,
from that to finding your next job, which could be the best job of it, like it just is never ending. So
yeah.
you
It's
do
it's
finding just a couple of weeks to like switch off the phone is really really hard and really really useful if you can.
yeah. If everything's a knockout, everything requires your full attention and full effort, and sustaining that over time is a challenge. And that's hats off to people that can make that work. And hopefully, resources that are developed through this project might contribute to that in some way. You mentioned actually in the podcast we did on coach wellbeing, you mentioned that you would like to try out an on-call system. So you have those times of the week where you're definitely with the team. You have those times of the week where you're definitely not. But then you have times where you're sort of available if needed. And you mentioned that was, I think, it's something you're going to try and do more of. I wonder if has that been successful over this
No,
bit?
I haven't really been able to do that at all. I think that's also part of the thing, ironically, with a part-time team. So Nord is a part-time team, and weirdly, that actually has made it worse for scheduling stuff, because it's not like we play on these days. It's like we get the games in that we can get in, and everyone's schedule changes every week, and there'll be a lot of stuff that's more important than the scrimming. So you can't just book scrims on certain days. So ironically, it's actually been harder. Whereas if you were in a full-time team, which is demanding a lot more from you, you could say, like, if I do join a full-time team, I'm going to say, right, guys, everyone, after 9 o'clock, I'm not replying to messages because my phone's off. I'm done. And on my off day, I'm not replying. And then you just make sure you do that the first few times, and hopefully people will get the picture. And it's like, right, call me on WhatsApp if needed, but I'm not going to reply to Discord. If it's an emergency, you can call me, kind of thing. I think that would be really, really good. But then on the flip side, I have a lot more time that isn't specifically with the team, so it's not like it's all worse, because it is part-time, so there is less hours. So it's kind of this weird, unfortunate situation where you're kind of always on, but actually you're fully on much less. So not ideal, I think, for me, but what we've got to deal with currently.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I sympathise to some extent with having to. I've worked previously in a full-time role, having to organise a part-time staff of assistants there, and actually ended up doing more work because people would check in and check out, and then I'd need to be available when they were out because I was still on. And then when they came back in, the extra work was actually updating them as to what's going on when they were away, with regards to sort of, how did training go? How did this exercise work out? What was the plan? That kind of thing. And it was actually really, really, really tough to orchestrate that, because it felt like actually you're doing a job and a half there. So you've got to have very sophisticated systems to be able to deal with that. And and you're setting with people remote as well. It's not as easy as having like just tasks on a whiteboard that everyone can sort of check in. Everyone kind of comes to you for their instruction and their direction. So challenging times. So in terms of the survey for the eHealth project, players of any region, any level, any game can complete this survey. We're looking for 500 responses. I think we've just ticked over 280, so got a way to go. But there's a big pool of players there that are eligible. And when they run through this, these 2 pages of questions, and they tick the scales as we've just sort of talked about, at the end of that, all the results anonymously will be pulled and analysed. And there will be things in there that maybe things are generally good, maybe things are generally poor, and we'll use that information to inform resources to help in those areas. So some of the need areas could be, for example, strategies around sleep. So as you've articulated there, you have some strategies that you have used resources to create, and in exactly the same way, the work from this research could suggest, that gap between final game and head on pillow, and what to do in that space optimally to try and increase the likelihood of sleep, the quality of sleep, the quantity of sleep, that kind of thing. So I hope it was kind of interesting for you to run through some of those questions. I hope it was informative for the audience and potential respondees to the questionnaire. And that's basically the scientific method right there. Like we need to do some observation, we need to collect some data to analyze and appropriately inform anything that is developed, an intervention, a resource based on that. So
Yeah,
that's the e-health project, and we touched a bit on their coach well-being and your experience. How do you feel about the finals, just overall? Like, is it?
we can move on to like a kind of overall finals reflection, because, like I said last time, I think that with the way that I approached it, I had a lot less impact than I wanted to, because I didn't do the kind of sorting things out, the planning, what we would do, all that kind of thing. It all felt a little bit rushed. This time was much better, but of course, still not all that good. I think there was a few big problems. Is that firstly, I was because I was ill, so we missed out on this boot camp. And what I would have done at the boot camp is found time to talk with people about developing like specific strategies for the final. I think one of the things that happened in both finals is, at least from my point of view, it felt very obvious that we were playing less than them, because they had very specific and very, just hats off to them, very good strategies to beat us both in the draft but also in the game. Specific approaches that you'd have time to prepare and time to think about and that kind of thing, which would have been really good for us. But like I said, I think mostly this is my fault for being ill rather than anything else, because we don't have the luxury of saying, right, I was ill, therefore we're going to have a meeting at this time on Friday when I arrive, or after scrims, because we can't. Because after scrims we have to go straight into other streams, because if you turn your stream off for a bit and then turn it back on, you lose 25% of your viewers, and suddenly it messes everything up. So that was a bit of a problem. We didn't talk as 6 people all together about the draft for finals, and that is not a good situation to have happen. I think there was one big mistake that was made, that we made as an org, which was that we had this thing of wanting to have a dinner together, which I think is a really good idea, and talk together. And it was at the one time when org could say, like, right, we're gonna pay for the dinner. But the problem was that we ended up, I didn't know this. I thought we were going to have it on Thursday or Friday. But obviously I wasn't there on Thursday, so maybe it's because of that. Something happened on Friday where it wasn't able to be, because one of the players had a meeting, I think, again, around the stream, which has to take priority. And then we ended up doing it on Saturday, which I think was a terrible choice, to be quite honest, because we watched the games. Then Jankos had to go and do his LEC co-stream, because he's contracted to, so he has to. And then after that, we went for dinner. And so I ended up talking about draft, cycling through Copenhagen at 11 o'clock with Jankos for the first time, because I talked about it with other people who'd had time before, but we never did it as a group. And I think what we should have done instead is just after LEC, like, all gone somewhere and we can get takeaway pizza or whatever, and just spend however many hours are needed to talk about it as a group, to actually be a lot more prepared. So that was a big problem. And that's one of those things where it's just, because I wasn't as available, I wasn't asked about the fact that this schedule was changing and stuff like that. And I think it was a kind of a big mistake, but there's not really much to be done around it, because there's just other things that have to take priority. And like I say, I would have wanted to come into the week and had a lot of time to talk about it with everybody and have specific strategies. Like, this is not just what we're going to play, but the way we're going to play to beat, because we kind of knew it would be loss of tones, right? But this is the way that we're going to beat them. And we didn't have any of that, and they had it. So that kind of thing, I think, wasn't quite so good. So the preparation before the game, I think the non-game specific stuff was much better. We knew where we were going to go. We knew where we were going to be. We knew how much. Well, even that we somehow managed to miss something. They did. This is a random thing. They did a concert in between the best of 5. So after game 2, there was a musical performance. And so it was actually a 45-minute break. And Molecule, one of the coaches for LR, was saying like, this is such a good thing for whichever team is losing. So it happened to be us. Like, we were 0-2 down. We could have had the time to like fully mentally reset and all that kind of thing. And I, again, would be a bit upset about that if I was winning a best of 5. But I don't know how. For some reason, we didn't know that it's going to happen. So also our ref didn't seem to know. So we were rushed out of our room. You normally have 15 minutes in between. So we were rushed out of our room just like normal. You have to be down stage at whatever it is. They literally give you like 01 or, like not like 15. It's like you have to be there at 18 minutes. You have to be at exactly 15 minutes. You have to be there ready to go back on stage. And that still happened. Then we went down to the stage and there's music going on. And we're like, this is a bit weird. So we stood by the stage and they told us, okay, you're going to go on after they were like, well, as soon as the song finishes, we'll probably start. And then the next song started and we were just still standing there. And we just ended up standing behind the stage with massive speakers, just standing still for like 10, 15 minutes. And then we ended up saying like, well, like, because we were told we can't leave because we were about to go on stage, but we were about to go on stage for 15 minutes. So we couldn't talk because it was too loud. We couldn't do any of the, like I said, if I'd have known it was 45 minutes, it would have been really, really useful. And it would have been actually really unfair for the other team because we'd have had this time to like really talk about it and really get into it and really decide what we need to change and have loads of time to prep the next draft and all that kind of thing. But we just didn't know. So we prepped the draft quickly, went down to the stage, and then didn't want to start talking about draft again because we were told we were about to go on. So we did that for sort of 10, 15 minutes, then ended up going outside for like 5, 10 minutes. But again, thought at every moment we were going on stage, so didn't get into anything else.
Of course.
So that was a bit of a thing that I think failed somehow in our research, that we didn't know that was going to happen. But again, unfortunately, because I was ill, the day where everyone went to the facility and would have asked all these questions, I wasn't there.
Right.
So I had the same problem again. Still, it was much better than it was in winter, but still had some of the same issues around the game and around the recon part that we spoke about before on a previous episode.
Yeah. That's a horrible question to ask, but would you do anything differently in future, knowing that, like, this is what happens when coach gets sick? I don't know if there's anything you can do. Is there with part-time squad, like empowering another coach, another staff member to do it, but they also have.
I did ask another staff member to do it, but unfortunately, because it's not quite as easy as just go and find out everything. And one of the things as a coach and as someone who spent so much time working in high performance, I think that I'm fairly good at finding all these little details and asking the questions that need to be asked, but I can't think of them that much in advance. So I did send a load of questions to our manager, but he's also doing loads of other things. He's got to do all his job as well. So to get him to do my job too.
I can just imagine you walking in on, like, let's say days in advance. I could see you walking in, looking at where you're going to be playing, and then noticing like the drum set or something next to it, and you're just thinking, well, when's that going to happen? So I can totally get it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I would have caught it because, like I say, our ref didn't seem to know. The person who was in charge of our team didn't seem to know. So if I'd have asked them how long is, and it's just the same in between every game, they might have just told me, yeah, it's the same in between every game. And it turns out actually it's not. After game 2, there's going to be a 45-minute break, not a 15-minute break. Because if I'd have known that in advance, that could have been a really useful thing. That would have been a great thing to know. That we can have a full like mental reset, and then if you win that game afterwards, suddenly like the reverse sweep is really on because it's like a whole new series because it's been 45 minutes. So it was a bit of a strange one, but there's always going to be stuff like that. And I think one of the important things, as we've spoken about before, that you have to make clear as a coach is that, especially when you're in person, there's always going to be stuff that comes on. There's always going to be things that disrupt how you should perform, and you're going to perform worse probably because it's a stage as well, massive crowd, all those kind of things. It's not about being perfect. It's just about being better and dealing with the adversity better than other people. didn't have time as well to do a scrim where I paused the game for them and told them not to talk or anything like that, because there wasn't any scrims that I was there and conscious enough for, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So didn't have that as a practice, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it was better, and I think I had more impact, and I was able to talk to the players a little bit more about this other stuff. But also, I haven't with this team, with not having very many meetings, with not having very many times to talk, because everything we do, 99% of what we do, everyone sees. I don't have that relationship with them that I think I'm able to support them in the way that people might have needed, in terms of feeling too stressed or needing to relax or needing that extra 5 minutes themselves or anything like that, because I just don't have that built up relationship with them, which would be one of the core things that I would want to do in a full-time team, but we just don't have the hours, and it's not as important as playing games together.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it hasn't been a long time that the team's even been together. Like, this is
it's a new team for the split.
Yeah. So, yeah, another esports sort of factor, that the lifespan of groups isn't all that long. So you could be planning. This would be super early in most major sports seasons. In the grand scheme of things, you might be thinking, well, let's try and work on getting together for this time next year. So that's also working against you a little bit there. And like you say, working on the adaptability, I think there's a nice term, the psychological resilience of the team in the face of these issues would be interesting. But then it's just, given the short time span, given the part-time factor, there's a lot of things working against you that make this terrain a little bit more difficult to pass through. So, well, it sounds like you did, as well as you possibly could, given the circumstances. And I can't even believe that you were back on your feet after the illness that wiped you out there. That's I think that would, testament to your determination.
Yeah, I mean, it was still, like I said, it was a great event to be a part of, and they're a fantastic team to have as a foil, as it were. I will say it's not lost on me as well, of course, that our team only exists and these events only exist because of them. I actually mentioned it to Kieran, who is their, I think he's their head of esports, but he used to be the owner of Excel, so we know each other very well. I saw him the day before and mentioned it to him, like, thanks for filling out the stadium for us, because it was a fantastic event, and
That's great.
It's interesting it's always fun to have a crowd. It's always interesting. I still think it's fun to have a crowd who's cheering for the opposition and not for you, because I've happened to be in that situation multiple times.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a fantastic event, and like I say, I think still much more happy with my performance and my own contribution than I was. But a few things still somehow that I think I needed to do, but I don't know how I could have done them. I needed to somehow know that this thing was going to happen. I needed to somehow know that our schedule has been changed, but I can't be every 5 minutes asking, is the schedule changed? So, needed to be very clear that we needed some time to talk as a group, or find some time in the week to talk as a group. But my initial plan was to find some time in the week, and that went out the window when I wasn't there, because finding those little 5-10 minutes over and over again through the week is really important and really useful, and actually would have been possible based on all the constraints that we have. But you can't really do that on Discord. You can't just see people as they walk into the facility and have a 5-minute chat before they boot on the PC. You can't really do that like online. So online it has to be like scheduled, and scheduling things is always going to be hard for us when the stream and the other commitments take priority over the performance. So it's there definitely could have been things that I would have done better, but I don't know how I would have done them in practice, if that makes sense. I don't know how I would have been in the situation where I would have known, because like I say, again, if we just use this, I don't want to fixate too much on this concert thing, but if we just use that as an example, like if the ref that's taking us doesn't know, then how would I ever know in practice? But of course you can. I do think it is still good as a coach to look back on these things and think what I could have done better, and not be generous with yourself and think, there must have been a way for me to know this, and there must have been a way for me to know that our dinner was changed, and there must have been a way for me to force us to have an actual conversation about draft. But also be forgiving enough to think, like, there's always going to be stuff. I'm never going to get to an end of the event and say, nothing I could have done better. And
Yeah.
that would be the time to worry, to be quite honest. If I ever finish these and we do one of these reflections and I say, yeah, nothing could have done better, absolutely nailed it, that's the time to be concerned.
Yeah, well, that's the final podcast in our series, right? That's when we get to podcast 300. Like, you're perfect, and
Yes, I've completed coaching. Yes,
that's it. Yeah, we go. Yeah, fantastic. Interesting when you're talking about that. Just I'm seeing it in terms of some psychological research that looks at the stressors. So there's this word stressors, basically the factors that cause stress within a coach's work, and they categorize it according to personal stressors. So things outside of your esport involvement, for example. They look at organizational stresses. So these might be things like logistics and preparing for a trip with your team, sort of thing. And then there's the performance stresses. So that can be actually just the anxiety of competing against a high level component and knowing that it's important. And it sounds to me like actually you're handling the potential performance stresses extremely well, and you're coping very well with all the emotion around a big competition that matters. You're also quite, I think by the sounds of it, you haven't brought up personal stresses there that are, for example, maybe your time is torn between family members, that require travel, and that eats into time that you need to prep for. That hasn't featured highly in this conversation. But what has featured quite highly is the organizational side, and how that's that kind of gets in the way. But also when it's not even that it gets in the way, sometimes it's just it could be better, and if it was better, it could actually have helped your team performance, coaching ability, all of that. So that just shows that, like, there are maybe things that aren't always clearly obvious in the coaching role that can get in the way. So yeah, interesting. And I mean, thank you for articulating it all and being so open about it.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, that's one of the roles that I'm very interested in doing, and one of the roles that I think we're not good at the moment in esports is that if we think about this from again, I'm going to use the rugby example with South African rugby, is like, okay, so Razi's the director of rugby. He's the one who's sorting out that people go to Japan early enough and they have a list of things that they need to know and all that kind of thing. So the head coach is just doing the coaching. And that's literally how he described how he wanted the role to be. Like, because of course, this is something luckily we don't have to deal with, but there's a huge amount of politics involved in being a head coach of especially an organization like that. And he said he wanted a role that existed so that the head coach could just do coaching. And that, I think, is the part of esports we don't do particularly well at the moment, is someone to be across everything so that the head coach can just be coaching. And that, I think, is something that's really like needed going forward.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Great.
All right.
Okay, well, that's going to be it for the episode. We didn't have time for getting questions today, so that is something that we'll pay attention to going forward. If you aren't already, please also follow the new X channel where you'll have all information about the show. I should probably put it somewhere in here, but oh well.
Yeah.
I'll think about that for future episodes. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Please check out the eHealth survey down below. The more people who reply, the more people you can share it with, the better it's going to be for everybody. We can build better tools for people who are just coming in, people who are doing it for fun, or people who want to take it really, really seriously and want to go pro. And across all levels, it's just going to be really good. And even for ERL teams, honestly, this will be really good. So if you're a fan of any ERL team, fill out the survey so that they will have better information going forward.
Yeah, that's a perfect short for the episode. Brilliant. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks, John.